Ben Riggs presents Reading D&D Aloud. Episode 55 with Stephen Radney-Macfarland. Are TTRPG designers geniuses?
Greetings, one and all. It is I, apparently controversial D&D historian Ben Riggs, and with me is a designer whose resume is so broad and so deep that I struggle to summarize it. I mean, it's hard to say that you're a D&D guy. It's hard to say that you're a Paizo guy because it's hard to say that you're, I don't know how much you want to talk about Gripner, but like that certainly seemed like an interesting project too. And to classify you as any one of those things is to do a disservice to your other entries on your bibliography. So let me just ask you, how would you describe yourself as a designer, Stephen Radney-Macfarland?
Uh, Crap. I'm just I'm curious. I'm always looking at new angles. I started out in organized play with the Living Greyhawk campaign and various other sorts of things. I moved on to development work, not only as part of the extended team on the 3.5 edition, which the extended team, if you want to know who they are, they get the special thanks at the end. And I'm like, wow, I did a lot of work and a whole bunch of meetings just to get a special thanks, but okay, whatever. And then worked on fourth edition and then moved over to Paizo, worked on first edition, Pathfinder and Starfinder, and then second edition, Pathfinder. And then now I work for, well, myself, although we'll see how long that lasts, working for a bunch of clients, including Gripner at that time, which was fun and exciting in the start. We got, it's like, let's leverage what's good about blockchain, right? Not all of the crap about blockchain, but use that as a tracking mechanism for people's role-playing characters in an organized play system that we designed. And of course, right, we were quickly branded as Crypto Bros, which I was all like, I don't know. But I like there's so much bad in the crypto sphere, some of which I saw. Like once upon a time during the dot-com boom, I worked in downtown Seattle. I was a tech guy there. I saw a bunch of crazy stuff. My brief foray, into crypto, I met a lot of people who just reminded me of those days, but without the forethought of some of those things, which I was like, oh, come on, you can be better than this. And so we always strive to be better than this, better than that. But if our president has taught us anything, that you got to scam to make money. But I try. I get. Crypto game companies still come to me. I tend to. I'd like to stay out of crypto for a while. I'd also like to pay my bills. So we'll see how long that lasts. Right. I mean, I think there's some really good things with the blockchain you can do for game tracking and everything else, but I don't want to work on anything that's predatory. That's against. That's not why I create games. That's not why I work on games. That's not the fun that I find in games.
Well, and I wasn't planning on sliding into this, but here we are. And when you were posting on social media about your work for Gripner, again, I am not a tech guy. I only know what YouTube has told me about blockchain.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't sound that super interesting. But like when Stephen Radney-Macfarland says he's working on a role-playing game involving blockchain, I'm like, well, I'm at least gonna wait until the product is out before I start throwing anything or saying something about it. And
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And what was released, and it's still there, even though I don't work on that project anymore, is a really great sort of gathering place for games. I worked with the tech team to make that thing functional. I worked with a really fantastic tech team called Revelry from New Orleans. We hired them. Some of the best people I've ever worked with on the tech side of things. And basically we made character tracking where, there were some things within it that I disagreed with. The owners of the company really leaned into the whole idea that you get a randomized character and then you learn to live with it. And I'm like, well, that's not really the way people want to do, but I lost those battles and made the best of it. But, people are still playing the games. They get treasure. Those treasures come in the form of NFTs. There's a way you can attach NFTs to your characters every time you play. And then your character NFT, every time you level up, it changes based on our version of the fifth edition rules. And I got to create a world and a bunch of adventures that I'm still very proud of, and people really enjoyed playing. But it was a great experience for me, both in what I learned, in both the successes and the failures of that. And if I had to go back in time, I'd probably do the same thing over again.
Well,
'Cause
let me go ahead,
best.
sir.
Yeah. No, that's
Let me jump to what made me hit record in our pre-show, which is the creative life or the creative lifespan of a game designer. Because there's often conventional wisdom about the creative success of various vocations. Like it certainly seems like if you're a writer, often if you have an early hit when you're young, it's really hard to recapture that. If you're a writer who kind of plugs away and has a bunch of failure, maybe you can have a longer lifespan. And again, there's exceptions to every rule. Like Stephen King started having hits pretty young, and obviously is still writing things that people engage with well into his 70s.
yes.
Um, uh, poets again. It seems like they're either like going to be a hit when they're younger and then have a hard time maintaining that, or they're gonna develop something over a long period of time that sticks with them. Actors obviously have a long lifespan. It seems like game designers have a shorter lifespan, at least to my eyes, and I'd love to hear you disagree with that. But it seems like oftentimes designers have this fertile period where they do some amazing work, but oftentimes then it's hard to go back either to that well or to create a new well. Gygax and Arneson, I mean, had they both died in 1974 after the publication of Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know how much people would care about missing their other work. Again, then you can have a long discussion about the Dungeon Master's Guide, right? But what do you think? What do you think about the creative life of a game designer? Tell me I'm wrong. I love it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's like the creative life about just about anything, right? I mean, you take actors. Some people have very long careers. Some people have short careers or blips in their careers, and then they either go away or they come back. I forget who the actor is, but the kid who played Short Round
Oh
and Dead
yeah,
and everything else.
I'd have to
He
look up
was
how to
actors of
pronounce
the
his
year.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it is his younger roles were still well respected and everything else, and or bands. I was watching. I'm a big Iron Maiden fan. It's amazing that they are hitting 70. They're on their new tour, and I was watching performance of their new tour, and they're still like right on the money. But uh, but Vince Neil is obviously having a hard time reaching the heights that he did when he was younger. So I think a lot of it is there's this great Rush song called Marathon that is a big inspiration for me when I'm feeling kind of down about either a project or the trajectory of my career. It's all about kind of the will to do things, to put yourself out there. Um, to know when things are baked or half baked. I've been doing this professionally for over 20 years. I hope to do it. I joke around with my girlfriend. It's like I want to drop at my keyboard. Um, um, that seems like a fun and fitful life for me. One of my biggest heroes in the industry, just a monumental career And there are still people who are like, who? And that's Kim Mohan, right? And I talked to Kim on and off. We were good friends until the end. And he was like one of my last conversations with him. He was talking about, how he got to advise on the D&D movie, on Our Own Thieves, and what a great privilege that was. And then unfortunately he passed, before he could actually see the movie, which was
And for those who don't know, he was a long time D&D editor, went from TSR over to Wizards, and he was still editing
yeah,
fifth edition stuff, right?
he was, yeah, up until the end. And and Kim had one of those personalities where he was very proud of his work, but he never really looked to be in the spotlight. And I kind of see sort of there's a lot of people in our industry, and I've worked with them, and I know them, and I deal with them, and everything else, where they come to a point where they worked really hard, and now that they become what they call quote unquote famous, and and they're more interested in being famous in the industry than actually getting work done. And and I always thought that was a bit ridiculous. Um, the reason why I did this in the first place is because to me it's the funnest work you can do. Right. I had a big argument with one of my bosses, and he goes, I just don't want to create spells and feats and magic items all my life. And I'm like, I think that's the fun part. Like, I get to make these fun things that people go and play with, that I get to play with, and really create fun around their tables that will endure in the stories that they tell with their friends.
Wow. Well, let me follow up then with what would you prefer to write? Would you prefer to write an adventure, create a new setting, or design an entirely new game?
Well, why would you limit me like that, there, Ben? All of them have kind of different challenges. Settings, of course, are intricate and weird. Even if it's a rules light setting, it's got to be able to do so much. Hopefully, eloquently and elegantly, right? In both as little words as possible, but as many words as needed. And it's got to kind of spark that imagination and give players, and by players I mean both those playing the heroes and the GM, the tools that they need. And so that is, I've done a lot of those, and they're always fun and they're always frustrating. By the end you're always exhausted. um, Adventures are kind of a similar thing, where when I'm writing an adventure, especially if it's something like an adventure path or what, it's living in my head, right? And so much so that the people around me are like, Stephen, wake up. What are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about these encounters and how I don't think they're working out, and I have to scrub it or everything else, right? Because with that, you're trying to create a storyline where you don't know who the main characters are. And so you've got to create it in such a way where whatever the main characters are, they're gonna have fun and follow the leads and the beats of that adventure. Campaign settings almost seem, strangely enough, easier in comparison, is because you've got to it's all about building good hooks that people will be excited about. You don't have to explain everything. You have to explain just enough where people are like, that sounds cool. And then, usually you have one or two personalities. When is the publisher going to tell me more? And I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to tell the story. I vastly prefer those second folks, because uh, uh, both those folks have a bad tendency of being disappointed when you do sort of flesh out that mystery, because it's all nebulous in their head. It's just cool. And as soon as you find out the backstory of like Darth Vader or Hannibal Lecter, you're all like, really? That was it? Oh, I was expecting more. You don't know what that more is, but it's always more when you don't have the answer. So in some ways, they're all fun. They're all challenging. I think campaign settings might be the least challenging, of the three, just because you can, as long as it all congeals well, and sometimes you don't even have to have it congeal well. It's just throwing out hooks for other people to play with it. While the other two, you're trying to put the boundaries that don't seem like boundaries into the system. Um, all three of them deal with a certain amount of illusion. They're all
Wow.
kind of magic tricks.
So, a thing I say all the time, and it was the spark of this question, is, it seems like there's typically three modes of TTRPG creation, which is again the system, the setting, and the adventure. Um, and as you were talking, the thought crossed my mind that it seems like there's probably not very many other creative endeavors that have that kind of diversity of modes. Like if you're a fiction writer, you might have to create your world, but you don't have to explain it to everyone. You just explain it in your story, right? And a fiction writer has plot and character, but they don't need to worry about the physics of the world in the way a game designer does. Uh, and that got me thinking, again, like I've known a lot of writers, I've known a lot of creatives in my life. I've known people in Hollywood, I've known people that have uh, created Marvel characters, and maybe the role-playing game designers are the smartest bunch. Like, I'm not calling anyone else a dummy here, but when
Right,
I
right.
think about just like the raw intelligence of an adroit tabletop role-playing game designer, like, it's a bit like sitting in the hot sun. Um, and so I guess I'm working up to this question because again, I didn't think of it until we started talking. Have you ever noticed that? Do you feel like tabletop role playing game creation is so demanding that the best and the brightest in the field just seem a bit sparklier than people who might excel at other creative endeavors?
I don't know. I've definitely, I mean, I've met people in all sorts of creative endeavors, and I'm always fascinated by the kind of behind the scenes of other creative endeavors because it reminds me, and I'm like, oh, this sounds a hell of a lot like, like stories of, Star Trek actors getting together and talking about, the fact that they would, get these lines at the last minute. And they'd look at these and go, well, these are kind of dumb and everything else. And it reminds me it's a workplace, right? That there's a lot of sort of people with their hands on the wheel. And there are definitely plenty of things within, my my experience in the role-playing game and tabletop industry where I'm like, well, that's a dumb idea, but those are my marching orders and I'm going to go. And I can sit there and say, well, that's a dumb idea. And sometimes I'll be right, and sometimes I'll be dead wrong. And once I see it, I'm like, oh, now I get it. And so I don't know if they're sparkly. I think once you every once in a while when I talk to a game enthusiast, right? And of course, the great thing about game enthusiasts is they love the game so much and they spend so much time playing in the game. They're very entitled to it, which I actually think is wonderful. But when I start talking to them, they're like, "Holy crap, this is a job. This is work." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." I mean, I think it all started with free time and like, wouldn't it be very cool if we could, you know, do this as a career, but career and work always has times where you get projects you're not as passionate about as you would like to be, but you try to instill that passion in there. You try to make it the best thing possible. You have disagreements with your bosses or other designers or developers down the line, and they're dealt with in all sorts of fashions from down knockdown drag out arguments to passive aggressive nonsense. Um, and it's when I look at a product because I know so many personalities and I've worked with so many personalities in the industry, there's a part of me where the magic is stripped away because I can look at something and I go, oh, so and so did that. They're still clinging on to that, what I consider bad argument. Or, oh, good, I'm really glad that this person got the chance to work on this project because it's something that they've, you know, or I believe it's something that they've been wanting to work on for a long time. So so I don't know if I think anybody who bites the bullet and says I'm going to do something creative with my life instead of going and doing a 9 to 5 job or and everything else, you run the risk of having too much of a good time by the end of it, right? Where the thing you love becomes your job. And just like any kind of job, you don't have, you've got compromises, you've got days where, things don't come. You've got days where your coworkers are pissing you off. You got days where you're pissing off your coworkers. Um, and, uh, uh, and to do that in an industry that doesn't have sort of the fame, even the promise of really the fame and fortune that something like, residual back in the day anyway, residuals from TV or, you're an Oscar winner and everything else. But a lot of times we also forget that for everybody who reaches those heights in creative endeavors outside of it, there are hundreds of people who are scraping along, um, you know, who are immense talents in themselves and get to do this kind of thing. Uh, but either you forget about them because they seem to be in the background, or you've never heard of them, or you haven't read their book, or that's a comic you didn't pick up. But somebody out there really loves it. And hopefully a few, but folks really love it. I mean, I geek out over artists that some people go, hmm? Like one of my favorite old school artists is Timothy Truman. And you've really got to be either in the weeds of 80s comics or, Dungeons and Dragons artists to know who Timothy Truman is. And so recently I went on his website and I could buy a signed print for a comic he did called Grimjack. And I was like, well, that's something I want. And when I got it in the mail, it came in a box he's got very distinctive handwriting. It was obviously addressed to me in his handwriting with big, and I still have that box because I'm like, Tim Truman, wrote my name. I love his work. And I still love his work. But, like I said, I'm one of hundreds, if not thousands, and, when I talk about like sometimes my girlfriend sits there and says, well, when you make $1 million from Delve, I'm like, I will make hundreds of thousands of dollars on Delve, and I'll be very happy with that, right? Which is the role playing game I've been working on for years now that I'm pushing to get out this year, or at least the first product of it. So I don't know. I don't think I could really make that analysis. I'm glad you think so.
I don't know is a fair answer.
Right. I don't know.
And it's not a theory. It's just a noodling thought that came into the brain, and then you said Timothy Truman, so of course I had to click over to his website and poke around, and I'm like, damn, he's brilliant.
Yeah,
And of course,
yeah.
once I see his work, I'm like, oh yeah, Conan covers for Odysseus and a few other things that I'm like, oh yeah, of course. So as long as we've wandered into kind of discussing people in the industry, if one of the handfuls of tabletop role-playing game millionaires came to you and said, all right, assemble your dream team of TTRPG creators. Who you're going to make a whole new line akin to Pathfinder. We're going to have some kind of a huge rollout for a game. Who are you bringing onto your team to make your flagship game for this new company?
Um, the first name is Rob Schwab. I think Rob Schwab is the best in the business. And I would not only want him on my team because he's the best in the business and he writes faster than anybody I know. And he good creative stuff is the man's got a lot of anger, and I'd like to, show him a good time in a project. I don't know if I can succeed. Like, there's part of me that I wonder if like he's fueled with anger, if I gave him, a whole bunch of projects that he'd be happy with. I don't know. Maybe I get shit back. So maybe he needs that. I'd end up having to like go to his house and beat him with a stick in order to get him to work. But every time I've worked with Rob, I've really enjoyed working with Rob.
And I should shout out, he is Shadow the Weird Wizard, Shadow the Demon Lord creator, Rob Schwab, and
Yeah,
yeah, worked on fourth edition, fifth edition.
Song of Ice and Fire, uh, Black Company. Like there's, the man's a machine, and he's a fantastic guy. Uh, a great friend of mine. Um, I would, yeah, he would be the first person that I bring in. James Lauer, not only for his talent for fiction, because I think fiction and role playing comes hand in hand, but Jim is a no nonsense, always does the right thing kind of guy, and so I would lean on him not only to be a great creative compass, but a moral compass on how to treat people within the industry. It's very important to him. He and I see eye to eye on those things. Again, I love Jim. Geez, there's so many really great people I worked with.
Hey, this is Lisa Stevens, Peter Atkinson money here, so you can have a
Right,
big crew.
right. Yeah. You can have a big crew. I would bring in Rob Heinsohn. I think Rob is, and when I worked with Rob, this would frustrate the hell out of me, but I also appreciate it a lot, is he is just an unbridled creative. He will bring the wackiest, craziest ideas to you, and you're going to throw out a good percentage of them, but there are going to be just shiny golden nuggets in there. And he's got this tendency to look at something and just look at it a little bit differently in weird and wonderful ways. I would definitely be tempted to bring him on. The weird thing about it is like I would probably start with those three just because one, they complement my shortcomings in some ways, and they also complement my desires in a lot of ways. And then I would probably look for a bunch of new people, uh, to kind of see what talent was out there. One of the I saw a lot of that coming into Paizo towards the end of my run. There was some, just really great new talent that was coming in, which I think now shows. But uh, I really think you need to keep an open spot for people who think differently than you, who have had different experiences than you, and maybe haven't drank the Kool-Aid nearly as much. Uh, there's a lot of people I've leaned on in the past. Logan Williams is a great example of that. David Christ, strangely enough, is one of the best event organizers. I eventually hired him into that position that he's done in Wizards. Now he does Bald Man Games. Absolutely. There's so many aspects to what makes a successful role-playing game. If I could grab Bruce Cordell, like Bruce Cordell is brilliant, and he's one of the nicest guys in the industry.
Put him in a trunk, drive him away from Monty Cook's house, get him.
Right. I don't think I would have to put him in a trunk. I'd just be able to, do you want to go out to dinner? And let's talk about something. And then we get drunk, and then next thing you know, it'd be working for him. That's he's also just a really, really fantastic guy. Jefferson Dunlap, who's the pre-press manager over at Wizards of the Coast, we met when I was in high school, and he came into a video rental store. I call him the greatest bottleneck at Wizards of the Coast. He's also just a fantastic guy who knows what fun is, and he's really, really good at what he does.
So if you were going to hire some new blood, and you were going to do it from just using your own personal library, so you have to hire someone new who is already publishing work that you thought good enough to purchase. Who might that be?
This is a question you should have prepared me for.
It's okay. we can pivot. I can move away from this.
Yeah, let's pivot on that because I like there's one I both of them, and I'm hoping my Facebook will help me out, and it's just not. Um,
Well, let me ask a follow-up question then.
yeah.
So if this is a follow-up from a long time ago, but I wrote it down. If you were going to recommend one Iron Maiden album to get someone into Iron Maiden, what
Oh,
album would you recommend?
that's a well, it kind of depends on the person. I know the I'd probably say Seven Son of the Seven Son. I think that's it gets to a point where it's proggy enough where you're gonna catch some people and still metal enough where you're gonna catch some other people. It's not the album I came in on. I came in on Peace of Mind, and then Power Slave came out, but um, I I think musically that's one of their best albums.
I have a friend who's a huge Iron Maiden fan, and I asked him that question, and he could not answer it because he's like, well, like worst songs share albums with best songs. Like you'll go from best song ever to some real awful music. And I'm like, this is not a very helpful answer, Mike. Sorry, and he listens sometimes. Sorry to pick on you, Mike, but so I was curious to see where you'd go with that. So that's lovely.
Maiden has they have a lot of I would call it self-indulgent songs, um, where it's almost like they get a little too geeky. They're geeking out a little bit too much. It's a very geeky band at its heart. I don't know if I would say anything's bad. Like I would say All the Peace of Mind is solid. Power Slave's solid. Summer in Time's solid. Uh, Number of the Beast is solid. There might be some songs in there you think is just like, oh, Jesus, all right, shut up. Or, that's kind of juvenile, but it's all like, you know, Maiden, like Rush, is one of those bands where you can always tell what the songwriters are reading or they're into at the time. They're great. Both are great sort of, I want to geek out on stories or concepts kinds of bands.
All right, so tell us about Delve.
Sure. Delve is kind of my meditation on D20 system, games. It's I the things I put in the things that I like about those systems and I take out the things that I don't like about those systems. Some of which ended up being in Pathfinder Second Edition, a version of the three-act economy, which is actually something I started. It was an epiphany I had working on Fourth Edition, um, and I was all like, I was doing some rules archaeology on things like initiative and why certain things live in Dungeons and Dragons that seem kind of a little dated and strange, and so it was like, why don't you just have a certain number of actions? That's the basis of what your character can do. Why do we have all these weighted actions? And a lot of that came from, you know, um, early war games where the person who went first had such a great advantage that you had to, sort of weigh stuff like that. And of course, it just kind of goes on in the system. And it's amazing how many things were just latched on to D&D or early in the game just because those were in systems that those guys played, which makes sense, right? Every artist has influences. Every artist sort of backs up to things that they learned from somebody else and love. And so I also don't like numbers that mean other numbers. It drives me crazy in games. 18 actually means four, so I throw that away. I want a game that the concepts are simple and straightforward, but both adventure creation and character creation are very robust. So you can do all sorts of things. I wanted to fix multi-classing in some ways. I want, so basically it's the game that I would rather, um, given everything that I know about the various editions of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and other role-playing games, it's all like if I could just throw out the things that drive me nuts and put in the things that don't, what does that game look like? And it looks like them. Um, and so, I guess you could call it a heartbreaker game in some way, shape, or form. I just look at it as me riffing on the genre. It's, this is my tune in the vast cacophony of game designs. And I've been working on this upwards to 8 years now, playtesting it at various conventions, um, and the feedback from the playtests has always been really positive. From those are neat things that you did. I really like that. To a small devoted group of fans, and like, this is the game I want to play. Finish it, finish it, finish it. And as somebody who spent his career with deadlines always staring him down the face, it's all like, for a long time I had this. I wanted to work on a game at my own pace, and then but this year I'm like, I gotta finish at least the the first book of this and get it the hell out there. One, just to see how people respond to it. Two, because I need money to pay bills, and hopefully it'll uh, give me some of that, and three, because I want people to experience them. So yeah, I'm happy with the game. I'll be happier when it's done. It turns out, when even this is for kin, which is what I'm calling ancestry or species. I was thinking about, like, I was watching something where somebody's talking about the new edition of D&D, and it's got these species, and I'm like, the only reason they didn't call them ancestries is because Paizo called them ancestries. It's like, there's this term in anthropology called schismogenesis, where one culture does something just because the other culture will never do that, and vice versa. And I'm just like, species is such a bad word for that. Uh, I came across another game. It was I know it was a Kickstarter. I don't know if it ever got released, but it was African fifth edition setting and story, and it had a lot of interesting things in it. But it's all like, they called him kin, and I'm like, kin is. I was thinking about people at first, but that ends up getting into some awkward sentence constructions when we start talking about it. And I'm like, all right, I like kin. I'm going to use kin. So it's got the base game has 4 kin, 4 classes, 5 levels. It's probably not, if it goes beyond 10 levels, it's going to fundamentally change the gameplay and what those levels do, because we all know, we've seen the numbers. Play drops off after 10th level. You know, uh, one of the craziest things we did in fourth edition was like, we'll go to 30, and it's all like, oh, why? Right? It's all when everybody's playing 1 to 10. Um, and and already, because the main book, there's going to be books for each classes. So if, like, the rogue is free, you can just pick up that book, and it's got like the first 4 ancestors, the rogue, and the rules of the game. The gear section, how you create a character, what the actual rules of the game are. But if you're the GM and you want the big thing, it's going to be like a 400-page book, because it's got a bestiary in there, and it's got a treasury in there, and it's got sample adventures in there, and everything else. So, and that's me working with pretty tight layout. So it's a layout right now, and some final tweaks where I have a lot of placeholder, like, go back, because you don't want to count squares. Okay, well, I'll make a zone system, but I haven't figured out exactly how that zone system works, because zone systems.
So, I teach seventh and eighth grade by day, and I have tried to avoid running D&D at school just because it's so time consuming. And really the only time I can do it is during my lunch break, which is an hour long. And if I do that, it's like giving up lunch for a couple of weeks to really get through character creation and an adventure.
Right.
So about a year ago, the tech teacher started running D&D fifth edition. He got a bunch of kids into it. They absolutely love it. And a week ago, a kid asked me to run D&D, and this is a kid where I'm like trying to make a breakthrough here, trying to connect, and I'm like,
Right, right.
sure, for you I'll run D&D. So, but I'm running Shadow Dark.
Yeah.
But a few of the kids had also played in the D&D 5th edition game. And at the end of school today, there was a heated discussion on the playground about Shadow Dark versus D&D 5th edition. Who preferred what system, the differences between the two of them, how they
Right.
felt about things. And there were heated proponents of both sides. And again, listening to you talk about Delve, it hadn't crossed my mind really how the variety of the form is a joy unto itself. It
Yeah.
gives us something to talk about. Everybody has their own flavor, and you can mix and match. But please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, I had some I'm fascinated by Shadow Dark. I like there's a bunch of Shadow Dark where I think Kelsey and I would see absolutely eye to eye as far as design goes. And then there are things where I'm like, I think this needs a little bit more here, right? Now, that being said, it's a perfect system, I think, for very quick games, uh, emergent storytelling, and and guys in their 50s, right? That are all like, which is me, right? Um, so you would think that I'd be all down with it, where it's all like, oh, it's I know the system, it's 5th edition. I don't have to read as much on the fly, which is great. And it's got enough variety that, well, it's good enough and we can really sort of, cram through rooms. And so, yeah, I've got a really weird sort of love-hate relationship with that game. I think it's a brilliant game. I don't really hate it. And anybody who enjoys playing it, I think that very small team did a fantastic job with it. But at the same time, it does leave me wanting more, right? I I'm one of the I want to give GM tools where they're not waiting for the emergent story, but they can drive they can create the story they want. I think there's a lot of GMs that want more storytelling tools in there. I think there's a lot of players who want a little bit more control over their progression. Um, and but but there are other times like I'm working on kind of for a publisher right now. I'm about to go and do some playtesting, and this thing is called Fred, and it is absolutely a beer and pretzels dungeon crawl sort of thing where Joe's late again. We can sit around and bullshit, or we can play something that's really quick uh, until Joe comes. And And so I think I think Shadow Dark lives in that perfect space where, maybe I'm still living in my 20-year-old head that just wants to think about this stuff all the time. I want the excitement of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't I don't want to read tons of stuff. I don't want to have arguments around the table. I want things to be quick and simple, and I can just move them along if possible. I don't need you to think 15 weeks about how your character is going to progress, right? And so I think that fills a perfect niche in in role playing games, and I love the aesthetic of it. Um, there's a lot to love about that game. I just don't think it's. I will like if somebody comes over to my house and says, "Stephen, I want to run Shadow Dark for you," I'll definitely play it. But I don't think I would play it regularly. I play it a game. I want something with a little bit more oomph. And I know some people are going to send me nests. It can have a lot of oomph, Stephen. And I'm like, of course it can, right? It can have as much oomph as, but I mean, just reading the core game and everything else. Uh, I think Shadow of the Weird Wizard has actually got, kind of more the level of oomph that I want from a game like that that's got simpler mechanics. Um, and but yeah, maybe that's just me.
Well, the some of the eighth graders were vociferously agreeing with you. on the playground today because they're like, that they wanted more options, they wanted more tactical depth. Uh, but as a DM, I'm like, oh, Shadow Dark is so fast. The book is so well organized.
Yeah.
Um, and I can see how players might prefer a fifth edition traditional experience. But interestingly, I don't know anyone who has switched to the 2024 rules. Um, and I know a lot of people of a lot of different ages playing games, but no one has switched to the new rules, which I'm not saying anything about them other than that one small anecdotal fact that no one has felt the need to do that yet. So it's interesting, but again, it's 30 people I'm going to say I know that play D&D.
Yeah. One of the projects that I'm working on that I hope is still going on is this Greyhawk project with Luke Gygax and this Melf based go back to where his father left off in rules, options, and adventures that definitely put his character in his that whole campaign, Melf at the forefront. And every once in a while, I have to come up with, because the first question I asked Luke, and I'm like, well, the new rules are coming out. Are we using the old rules or the new rules? And this was in the middle of, the OGL and who knew what we'd be able to do and everything else. And then in that project, I still I'm like, so are hobgoblins Fey in this? Are we having there's some things that we decided not to. Shieldlands is ruled by a dragonborn. Is that true? And they're like, no, no dragonborn. And I'm like, okay, we're keeping it old school. And I'm like, are hobgoblins Fey? Which that question I got crickets with. I think we're going to have to sort of do. And I played one game using the new rules. I played a monk, and I actually liked how the monk worked. But it was at Gamehole Con, and it was a streaming game. And me, who came with my character sheet and my rule book and everything else, and most of the other players came with 3x5 cards. I'm like, oh, we're like, you've got to realize there's a whole bunch of people out there who play fifth edition like it's Shadowdark. That it's all, don't bug me with the rules. I have a cool character, and the GM's going to guide me. And that's been true from D&D in general, but it's even more true, I think, a lot of times with fifth edition. It's you know uh, actual play stuff, I think, has to do with it. I think Ryan Dancy once called it amateur thespianism, which was very big in second edition, and I benefited from in second edition, especially in the RPGA. I unboxed a whole group of trophies that I won in the RPGA. And back then, it was popularity contest. If you could make people laugh around the table, there's a good chance you were going to win the table. And if your score was high enough to win all of the tables, you get a trophy. And I've got about 6 or 7 of these things. Just because I could, I play outrageous characters and use outrageous accents and everything else. And we have a bit of that now with actual play, where voice actors and comedians and everything else are doing that for larger audiences. But yeah, it's the weird thing about the new edition is it's not different enough, and the changes are so puzzling. You have to sit there and go, "Am I going to do that? Like, does that make sense? Does this really feel like I need to do this?" Uh, at least with 3.5, the real issue was there was a whole bunch of broken things in third edition that players were just riding roughshod over the rules. And so our first thing was, well, let's reel those in, right? Because people are just not having a good time with it. Let's give them a system where they'll have a better time. And then, of course, we fixed other things. Some people complained about them. Some people grasped them. More people grasped them than ever. but it's almost like a difference between fourth edition and essentials, where it's like, well, if you're really into fourth edition, does essentials do anything for you other than no? If fourth edition wasn't your thing, you're playing Pathfinder anyway, right? And so who cares? So yeah, it's you know, I my walk away from the 2004 2024 version of D&D is almost why. Like, a lot of new artists did great pieces of art. They fixed some issues and everything else, but I don't know if it was necessary.
Ray Winninger told me that his plan was okay, 2024 we release a new player's handbook with some revisions and but all new art.
Yeah,
Year after that, Dungeon Master's Guide, I think year after that, Monster Manual, year after that. There was I think it was Mordenkainen's that he wanted to make into a core book. And then every year from then on, you release one of those books revised with some new art, but the rules essentially are staying the same. It's just kind of like, where if someone new comes to the game, they're going to get this version, but it's not a significant change in the rules, and collectors are going to buy all of them. And once a year we roll a new one out, and okay, huzzah! And but D&D has largely achieved its final form. Would have been the statement with that. And it seems as though it has in some ways reached a final form, at least at Wizards, but again, I agree with you. The changes were not very large. So let me ask you a final question. But
yeah.
favorite adventure for any game system?
With all of its so anytime I work on a new edition of D&D or D&D adjacent, I always run Temple of Elemental. Just one, Village of Hamlet is it's almost like it's a precursor to just about every sort of video game you've ever played. It's all you come into civilization, you find out things, the plot thickens, and so even as there's a lot of complaints you can make about that thing, but I do kind of believe that it is the quintessential, at least until you get it into the nodes. Like the end game is sort of like Talisman. Like you're having such a good time, and then the end game gets so weird. You're just like, okay, we can just quit now, right? That's a weird thing about um, Temple of Elemental Evil. I don't. I think it like to me it just clicks. The I don't know if it's the funnest. I mean, Village or Keep on the Borderland it's got a lot of fun too. I don't think I found the fun of like I'm hoping to write it someday. I've got a lot of like, I really like this about this adventure. I really like this about this adventure. But I also think that adventures get really overwritten very quickly, and especially on like um, how people actually play D&D. Like I tend to write adventures now with scenes, and those scenes could be whole sections of a dungeon, but it's all like I I absolutely dive into the conceit that you're going to play a 2 to 4 hour session. I want the adventure to at least have some chewable parts where it feels like you started off somewhere and accomplished something, and then be a whole group of sections with that without being too artificial. I think, the whole open world, you can do anything you want thing it can be fun, but I really don't think that's how most people actually play the game. And it's definitely not how people who consume the game without playing it see it um, through things like various uh, actual play sort of things. So I don't think the funnest adventure has been written yet. I'm gonna give it. I really want to give it a shot.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
So how can people support your work? Is there some sort of Delve mailing list? Is there something they should go out and buy now?
So right now I have Delve hyphen RPG.com. That's website. I'll post things about Delve. I'll also, post my thoughts on things like virtual tabletops and whether or not, making orcs people is a good thing. And just sort of things that um, come up in my mind. I basically just started to rejigger the Delve Patreon. If you really want to support Delve, every Monday I'm putting up a monster from the bestiary. I'm also putting up basically something on the Delve website. I'd like to do it weekly or bi-weekly. The move ate a whole big chunk of that, and then there'll usually be some supplementary material that is on the Patreon about that article. So, and then I'm going to put other things on the Patreon. You can get T-shirts. I've got some game components you can already buy on the website. The initiative token, the Delve uses an initiative system that's an iteration of the one you find in Shadow of the Demon Lord. Just because I think it's the best initiative system out there. And what else do I have on there? Dice bags, or accessory bags, as I call them, and a set of cards that have things like magic items and exploration activities, other things that are in the game. So yeah, if you want to check those out, if you want to join the Patreon, I'd be very happy. If you want to buy some of my junk, I'd also be very happy.
All right, well, that's so awesome. We'll have to have you on again when you properly launch Delve. But this has been great. I can't thank you enough for coming on. And audience, it was on very short notice that Stephen agreed to come on, so I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Stephen.
Oh, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Always fun.